All right, and we are back for another edition of the Astro Weather. Hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, the 14th of March, and a little bit of a different background today. The ever-changing skies of our lives, the inner skies and the outer skies of our lives. So here we go. We're rapidly coursing through Pisces, getting down to it. The astrological year is drawing to a close and getting ready to really move into some very powerful Aries energy here coming up. We go into Aries season with the hint of the nodal shift that will take place in July, where we will confront the true node in Aries, the pulse of the will of the universe. It'll be real interesting stuff. Well, why don't we get into, I hope everybody's having a great day so far. And if you're not having a great day, guess what? That's okay. It's okay to not have a great day. Some days, you just got to chalk it up to experience. And other days, you got the wind at your sails. But there's always the option to tack. Why do I look a little fuzzed out here on the camera? It's like a very interesting, there's a difference, a little bit. I wonder if it's because my camera is a little, no, I think I look okay here. It's weird. The color resolution, as far as what I'm seeing, what you're seeing is different, but I'll deal with that tomorrow. All right, let's get into the Astro Weather. T-square alert. T-square, beautiful T-square alert. We got the moon in Sagittarius. An optimistic moon in Sagittarius. It is squaring off against the sun, squaring off against Neptune today, and squaring off against Mercury. So we have mutability. It is in the air. And of course, the moon in Sagittarius believes that it can conquer all with the right philosophical attitude. Anything is possible. Over here, again, we have the minions, right? The horde of Pisces. And I keep coming back to the mob here. This is the mobby Pisces energy. And this is the mob saying, well, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. You're not capable of that. Why even attempt that? Don't go there. You'll just be knocked down. Don't go there. Stay over here with us where it's nice and safe and we don't stick our necks out too far. This is kind of the energy today, right? The moon in Sagittarius wants to boldly go where no man or woman has gone before. It's an expansive emotional territory, even though the moon is cycling down here. And then, of course, we have the opposition to Mars, which is how do you put feeling into action, right? Mars is action. We have feeling over here on the other side of the chart. Well, you got to run it through the old Pisces mob. Run it through the Pisces mob. And in the midst of naysayers, I guess the kids call them haters, right? You run that energy through Mars, and it's like, fuck it. I'm going here. I'm going here. I'm going to go against the tide. And the tide is, I think, a good metaphor for all this Pisces. You know, Mars is moving into that tight square with Neptune, which we have been kind of presaging, talking about getting people kind of aware of this heavy duty victim energy. It's interesting that I think SVB Bank, or SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank, I think got bought out yesterday for $1 billion. I don't think that has really anything to do here with this square, or at least this T-square. Maybe it does. The victims of their own financial largesse and pulling their money out, cashing their stock out before the crash and the bank run, right? Oh, we're victims. We're victims of the market. and in comes another bank to throw $1 billion in and acquire all the assets. There's also this kind of rumor on the streets that this is that now I have not been able to fully uncover whether or not they were going to get bailed out or not. Like this is where we are with all the Pisces and the obfuscation of what's real. Even Mercury starting to move in to that conjunction with Neptune over the next few days. It's going to get more and more unclear about what's really happening. One day I read they're getting bailed out. Next day I read Janet Yellen says no. Then I read they're getting bailed out again. Then I read that they're being bought, right? So this is kind of the world that we're living in right now. Details are very fuzzy, very, very fuzzy. So today with the moon in Sagittarius, we're asked to make emotional decisions without all the information at hand. And with the moon in Sagittarius, sometimes you just got to say, fuck it, let's go. Let's do this, right? So you have to run the moon through here. And then whatever emotional synthesis comes through, yeah, I'll listen to you. Yeah, I'll take that into account, right? Then it's going to come through over here, right? And it's going to hit that Mars. Because, in astrology, let's say, for instance, we were in, I don't know, Aquarius season, okay? And we still had this Moon-Mars opposition. So how do you reconcile the Moon-Mars opposition? You find the midpoint, which would be over here in Libra. We can still do that, by the way. We don't have to leave Libra out of the discussion. So it's like, okay, these are my interests. These are my interests. These are your interests. These are our interests. Now, it doesn't always work out that way, but you try to find the midpoint. When you have an opposition, the midpoint is where you can reconcile the opposition. That's one way of dealing with oppositions. So when you have a T-square, what you have fundamentally is a midpoint, but it's a midpoint that is fraught with tension. Now here, the midpoint would not be fraught with tension because we know that air, sextiles, fire, air, trines air. So it is a graceful combination. Here, it's not so graceful, but it's still a midpoint, right? It's a midpoint fraught with tension. So it's one of these days where you know what you know. That's the nature of the Sagittarius moon, for better or worse. You know what you know. And then you literally have to take those emotions through the mob and then come out the other side and then activate Mars, which is action. So it's a very interesting process today. Now, could you just skip the mob and just go from here to here? Quite possibly. Quite possibly, but something interesting happens along the way, right? We get into transmutation when we go through the hard point or the focal point of the midpoint in this case, which is a mutable square. There's something interesting that can happen emotionally. This is also a day where there's a lot of very religious feeling in the air. This is Crusader energy today. This is the Crusades. I think of the moon in Sagittarius being fired up. We're going to level those Saracens. We're going to level those heathens, and we're going to retake Jerusalem for Christ. Right? That's moon in Sagittarius energy, and it's got to go through. It's got to go through the realm of the papal blessing over here. Right, with all this Pisces that comes out on the other side all fired up with the spirit of holy fire and holy blood. I mean, we've got this energy. It's sort of in the air. It's a very interesting day. I mean, just this T-square alone is very interesting. We're dealing with zealotry. We're dealing with crucifixion and more scapegoats and Mars and Gemini just taking no prisoners. I've been watching Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger go before Congress, and man, these journalists have been great to watch because they're so smart. They understand the nature of information. They understand the nature of how language is used, and they're not allowing themselves to get trapped in the sticky nets of the people that are interrogated. It's been fascinating, absolutely fascinating to watch, especially Taibbi, and to watch Taibbi kind of tilt his head. Taibbi the Pisces, these 2 degrees Pisces, just tilts his head. It's kind of like he's got somebody in his ear. It's like, yeah, I get it. And come back and start talking shit back to the people that are trying to nail him to the wall, right? They want to crucify Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi. Taibbi is the one who feels like they want to crucify the most. Of course, he's a Pisces. Right? So there's a lot of there's zealot energies in the air today. Zealot energies. So if you're filled with passion and zeal, maybe this is your day. Maybe this is your day. Now we do have some nice trine action with Jupiter and the moon. That's going to pump up that moon too. Again, it leads into more of that onward Christian soldier energy with Jupiter and Aries trining the moon. There's a lot of courage in the air today. There's a lot of courage. There's a lot of boldness. By the time the moon gets into the later phases of the day, it's going to move into a tighter trine with Venus. Lots of ardor, lots of passion. I like today. You get to see what you're made of emotionally today. How your emotional case stands up against the mob, right? But there's plenty of fiery energy in the air to carry this through. It's a very interesting day. We have Mars moving closer and closer. It's already in trine with Saturn, but as it moves closer to its ingress into Cancer by the end of the month, the energies are going to get really interesting. And when we deal with Cancer, we're also dealing with things like money. We're dealing with things like what we hold close to us for security. So it's not just money. It could be things like 401ks. Those are all really, really important menu items, right? With Cancer. And we are going to go through some squares here with Mars. As Mars moves through Cancer, it's going to square Chiron. We're going to deal with a Jupiter square at some point. So a lot of these things that are important to people in terms of, their resources and what they're conserving, they're on the line, right? They're on the line. And it just feels to me when I look at this chart, like the tides are turning here. It feels like the tides are turning. We've got the node, the final degrees of Taurus. And the whole thing with Taurus is momentum, right? Like Taurus needs momentum. It's the bull. And once the bull gets momentum, look out. Then it feels like we've been dealing with the true node in Taurus, and it starts off like just incredibly slow. It's sitting there, standing there, munching on grass in the field. I'll get there one of these days. But by the time we get down to the final degrees, 4, 3, 2, 1, there's some momentum there. And the momentum goes right into Aries. So these are really interesting times that we're in. And it feels to me like on the collective level, the tide is turning. On an individual level, today is a day where you're carried through the day by the passion of your feelings and your beliefs. And you get to see how well they're going to stand up against critics and people that tell you can't do that or you can't go there. The inconjunct early in the day, which is right now, with the moon and Uranus, leads to some very interesting emotional connections that literally pop in out of nowhere. This window doesn't last very long. It's only open for the next few hours. By the time we get down into the 20th degree of the moon in Sagittarius, it moves out of that inconjunct. So be on your toes for surprises over the next few hours. And they don't always have to be bad surprises. They can be interesting surprises. That's what the inconjunct brings us. All in all, I think this is a very interesting day. And as long as your emotions can stand up and, to the scrutiny of this kind of Piscean mob over here. And this is this is by no means a slam against anybody that's Pisces. I'm just using a phrase right? Because when we get into Pisces, we really get into the mob. We get into the swamp, right? We get into it's very swampy over there. So, this is not just a day where you're using your emotions, the zeal and the passion of your emotions to move through the day and to prove people wrong in a lot of ways, right? But it's also what's happening out there. And it's a very interesting day in the swamp known as Washington, D.C. All right. I can't get off this without talking about the financial stuff a little bit. Because when we get into the moon, we are dealing with things like our homes, and again, you're ruled by Cancer, that which we conserve. So I think the rhetoric is going to get very heated around this latest financial boondoggle, which seems to be another controlled demolition, in my humble opinion. Okay, let's get into the star of the day, who I think is really interesting. Sometimes I feel like people don't get enough women as the star of the day. Well, we're going to change that today. Today's star of the day is Diane Arbus. And there are quite a few people I could have chosen. It's a really rich day in terms of astrology and persona. Today is Albert Einstein's birthday. It's Steph Curry's birthday. It's Quincy Jones's birthday. There's some very interesting characters born today. But I chose Diane Arbus for a number of reasons. I want you to pay attention to this quote. Most people go through life dreading they'll have a traumatic experience. Freaks were born with their trauma. They've already passed their test in life. They're aristocrats. Let me read this to you again. Most people go through life dreading they'll have a traumatic experience. Freaks were born with their trauma. They've already passed their test in life. They're aristocrats. Why is she saying that? Diane Arbus was a photographer, and the subject matter of her work were freaks. Diane Arbus captured the fringe better than just about anybody else. She was one of the first people in the 20th century. You have some of this with Dorothea Lange or Imogene Cunningham, I think it's Dorothea Lange, Dorothea Lange goes into the really poor white parts of America, and I'm mostly white, but not specifically white. But she goes into Dust Bowl America and shows people that are rarely seen by the public, right? So I think Dorothea Lange is one of those early people to kind of capture the zeitgeist of, in a lot of ways, the dispossessed, right? But Diane Arbus takes it one step further. She doesn't go into the Appalachians. She goes right into the heart of New York City and finds people that are, for all intents and purposes, freaks. And her photography is groundbreaking in a lot of ways. Now, what's interesting about this quote is, look at Neptune in the eighth house. Neptune is artistic and creative, and the eighth house is the underworld. This is where she's really tapping into that occulted place where people just aren't seen. And then what does she use? She uses the phrase, they're aristocrats. And we see Neptune and Leo, which is Leo's aristocratic. And this is really her subject matter. And she's got this almost grand cross, not quite. We're missing the opposition over here, but we do have this Jupiter square to Neptune. She has Jupiter in what? In Scorpio, right? Scorpio ruler of the eighth house. And it's retrograde. It's in the 11th house. So she's out there in the world looking for a communion in a community of people that have this quality of being dispossessed. She's literally shining a light on the not so soft white underbelly of her time. And then over here, she has this Venus Moon conjunction, which I think allows her to be detached in a lot of ways, at least for a while, right? She's detached and allows her to use her relationships which are her subject matter, in a way where maybe she's invisible, right? She blends in with her subject matter and brings that high strange of Neptune and Leo down here into the second house. She's also championing the dispossessed with the South Node conjunct her Sun. She's in many ways, she has deep compassion for her subject matter. Now, the challenge with Diane Arbus is that eventually she succumbs to the material that she's capturing on film. Her life begins to mirror the tragedy and the pathos of the people that she's capturing on a daily basis. It's a very interesting story about an artist's life imitating their art. And because she's a Pisces, she's so susceptible to the transmission of her subject matter. It's interesting. Her husband, this is so weird, right? Her husband is an actor. His name is Alan Arbus. And he used to show up on the TV show MASH. And do you know what his role on MASH was? He was a therapist. He was a therapist. So Diane Arbus's husband, Alan Arbus, who's an actor, winds up playing the role of a military therapist, while his wife really succumbs to, in a lot of ways, the unfiltered pathos of her subject matter. It's a fascinating chart, really fascinating chart. And she's almost like a champion of their rights without necessarily, going to Washington and creating relationships with lawmakers in order to, have fly your freak flag day, right? That's Saturn in Libra. She's, this kind of hardcore balancing act, and it's squaring off against Pluto. And Pluto, too, over here in the seventh house is also her subject matter, right? She's one-on-one with people with that Pluto in Cancer. And she eventually loses it. It's a hard chart to hold together in a lot of ways. I mean, look at all the squares and the oppositions. It's very complex. I could probably sit here and talk about her chart for about the next 2 hours and try to pull this thing apart. But Diane Arbus, a very interesting person. I never made the connection that the guy who is, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but the guy that was in charge of creating MK Ultra, again, a therapist, his name was Sidney. It was Sidney Gottlieb. And Diane Arbus's husband on MASH was named Sidney as well. Although at that time she had passed away. And, she was in his rearview mirror in a lot of ways. But a fascinating star of the day, Diane Arbus, an artist whose life imitated her art. All right, that's it. Thanks for being here. Have a great day. Oh, I can't pass up the opportunity to tell you about 15 Minutes of Flame, which is right over here. And that's where I'll be in about 41 minutes, 9/11 Central Standard Time. Some of you have made the journey over and joined us. It's always great when you do. And then, of course, my sponsor, True Hemp Science, truehempscience.com. Remember that URL. It'll be in the description of the show, truehempscience.com. And if you want to get your organic CBD on, I cannot recommend a better place than Chris's digital storefront. If you buy $100 of product or more, just type in 15MINS, that's 15 mins, and you'll get free product. And $150 more gets you free shipping. So don't sleep on that great offer. All right, thanks for being here. Everybody have a blessed day. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the Astro Weather. Bye for now.